losing celebration, breaking into freedom. You're the song of our hearts. We cast aside our shadows, trust you with our sorrows. You're the song of our hearts. We're dancing to the rhythm of your heart. We're rising from the ashes to the stars. You're the joy, 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 light in my soul. The joy, 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 making me whole. Though I'm broken, I am running into your arms of love. The pain will not define us. Joy will reignite us. You're the song of our hearts. Come on, my soul. The dark is just a canvas for your grace and brightness. You're the song of our hearts. We're dancing to the rhythm of your heart. Oh, oh, oh. We're rising from the ashes to the stars. You're the joy, 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 light in my soul. The joy, 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 making me whole. Though I'm broken, I am running into your arms of love. You're the joy, 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 light in my soul. The joy, 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 making me whole. Though I'm broken, I am running into your arms of love. You're the joy, the song of my heart, the hope of my soul. In the shadows, in the sorrows, in the desert, when the pain hits, you are constant, ever present. You're the song of my heart. Oh, in the shadows, in the sorrows, in the desert, when the pain hits, you are constant, ever present. You're the song of my heart. You're the joy, 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 light in my soul. The joy, 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 making me whole. Though I'm broken, I am running into your arms of love, into your arms.
All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday morning, March the 31st, 2021. Now, yesterday we weren't able to finish the passage. We barely got started on it, and then we were dealing with some serious buffering issues. Our internet on this end was giving us some problems, and so, hold on, I'm sorry. So what we're doing right now is actually our repair person isn't able to come until Thursday. So what I wanted to make sure that we do is to have these prepared and uploaded. And so this isn't live this morning, and probably tomorrow mornings won't be live either. And then the technician will be out tomorrow. We'll get that taken care of. So we should be good by Friday back up live. But still, I'm glad that we're together here now, and we're going to be looking at this passage of James, or Jacob, chapter 1, verses 2 through 8. I'm just going to start over because we didn't get very far in yesterday, and I don't really know how much you were able to grasp because of the buffering issues, because there was so much, when it's stop and start like that, it's a real pain in the neck. So All right. Well, Father, we come before you this morning and we ask you, Lord, that as we read your word, Lord, that we won't simply have understanding with our intellect, but Lord, that your word would pierce us in the deepest part of our hearts and that we'll have understanding, that we'll grasp the heart of your word and will be continually transformed into your likeness. We love you and praise you in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right. So it opens up, and again, as I mentioned in our first on Monday, while we know the book as the book of James, his name was actually Jacobos. It's Jacob, and so I'll kind of go back and forth between Jacob and James. I'm talking about the same person. Verse 1, Jacob, a slave of God and of the Lord Yeshua the Messiah, to the 12 tribes in the diaspora, Shalom. And so when we talked yesterday about which Jacob this was, which James this is, that this is most likely the brother of Yeshua, that this is the first brother of Yeshua, and he had 4 brothers named, and this was the one that was first on the list, and he was a leader in the congregation in Jerusalem. When we read in Acts 12, Acts 15, Acts 21, Paul mentions him in Galatians chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. And so when he introduces himself here, he doesn't say, it's not, because there were 2 James or Jacobs who were apostles, and he doesn't identify himself as an apostle. He also doesn't identify himself as a brother because he's not seeking to lay claim to any authority because of his familial relation to Yeshua, but rather he identifies, though this may have been his brother, with him. He says, I am a servant, I am a slave to he is master, he is Lord, he is Messiah. I mean, how incredible would that have been to realize that your big brother growing up is the eternal creator, the living word of God. Anyway, so he continues here. Now, when verse 1 ends there, in our version it says shalom. But he doesn't use the word shalom. He uses, the Greek word here is charen, which is joy. And so it's a greeting, but it's like joyful greetings. I come to you in joy. And so that leads us right into verse 2. And what you have are, within these verses, you have repetition of certain words as he stacks one idea on top of another, as he builds a point, as there's a flow of thought. And so he's saying, I'm coming to you in joy and with joyful greetings. And then he opens up by saying, using the same word, consider it all joy, charan. So charan is his greeting, and then now count it all joy, consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials. So the opening phrase here in Greek says pasan charan, which is all joy, or everything, total joy, complete joy, igisaste, consider it, and we'll talk about that word in just a moment. But when he's in some versions, you may have heard count everything joy. It does not mean everything in this context. It means pure, total. It's describing the type of joy that we're supposed to have, the type of joy that we should walk in, and so this total joy, right? It's a all joy, complete joy, a total joy, stands in contrast to what he'll describe a little bit later as kind of a divided soul, double-mindedness, which he'll mention. So my joy should be single in terms of single-minded, a whole joy, and as opposed to, we'll see later, double-mindedness. And again, joy speaks of more of a state of being, a state of contentedness, a perspective that you have when you know the way the story ends, that you're not, when you're watching a movie, like I like adventure movies, and when I'm watching a movie, and I know that this ends well, and yet I don't know how it's going to get there. I'm confident that it's going to have a good ending. I just don't know what things are going to take place to bring it to there. So I'm enjoying the movie. There's a sense of assurance that everything's going to be fine. But I'm not, my state of being doesn't go up and down with every cliffhanger in there, right? I may be on the edge of my seat, but there's a sense of assurance that I have in the midst of that. So this joy that he talks about, having a total joy, total joy is sort of a settled contentment. And again, biblical joy is rooted in perspective. We're like we've talked about before. You're on the roller coaster, going up and down, but you're strapped in. There's a confidence that you have. So, and he's not telling us how to feel. He's talking more about our mindset, our attitude toward circumstances. And so he says, all joy or total joy, and our version says consider it or esteem it. Now this word higisaste, is a form of the verb hegeomai. Hegeomai means to lead, to rule, to think, or to consider, esteem something. So the noun version, hegemon, is a word for leader or chief or commander. So this word basically says, let total joy lead the way. Let total joy rule. Let total joy be your commander in every trial, right? So let total joy lead the way. And then he says, my brothers, and I'm repeating a couple of things because I said these things yesterday, but that recording is gone, and again, it was a buffer, so I feel like I'm repeating myself, but for most of you, I'm not. Whenever you see adelphoi, and when it says brothers, in Greek, that includes brothers and sisters, unless it lists the word for sisters afterward, that word would be gender inclusive. So he's speaking to brothers and sisters. So let total joy guide the way, brothers and sisters, whenever hotan, and then he uses this, there's a triple P alliteration word, perasmois, peripesite, poikilos, which is whenever you fall in with is the first word, the second word is to fall into. The first word is trials or tests. Whenever there are tests, whenever there are trials, perasmois, and this word, trials or tests, quizzes, as it were, carries the idea of something that scrutinizes, something that investigates. So when you face a trial, when you face something that is a trial, and is with the idea that we have when you face difficulties, and then he uses the word you fall into. Our version says encounter, but the word is peri. It's peri pipto, is to fall into, and it's the same word that Yeshua used when he told the story of the Good Samaritan and how the man had fallen into the hands of robbers. And so this is basically something that is unexpected, right? Here's a test that was unexpected. You fell into it. You didn't see it coming. You weren't expected. It's not welcome, generally, right? It's not something that you were going toward, that you were aiming toward, and that you've fallen into it. Say, well, what kind of tests, what kind of trials? Well, that's the final word here is many kinds, diverse kinds. It's a word that can be used to say many colored. It's a very trials of all kinds. So what happens when your internet upload stops working and you're trying to do a live stream? Consider it, look at it, let full and total joy lead the way. When you're facing trials of many kinds, little trials, big trials, what does it produce? What comes out of you in that situation? And of course, this brings to mind what Yeshua said in Luke 6 on the Sermon on the Plain. He said, Luke 6:22, blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and revile you, and spurn your name on account as evil on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and jump for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. Again, what is this about? This is about a joy that's rooted in perspective. Why would he continues, for their fathers used to treat the prophets the same way. So the joy that Yeshua is referring to is something that says, this reveals when you're being treated this way on account of my name, right? That in walking in my ways, rejoice in that, because it reveals that if you're walking forth in the word of God and the truth of God, that this is what they did to the prophets of old. So rejoice, consider it, count it, let total joy lead the way when you fall into trials that you weren't expecting of all kinds. When you fall into difficulties that you weren't expecting of all kinds, and so when someone says that to you. First of all, and again, the joy doesn't mean you walk around smiling all the time. It doesn't mean you're like, yes, I love it. Yeah, our internet went down. That's great. Oh man, bad things are happening. And that's a tiny thing, right? I mean, we're bypassing that issue by doing it this way. But when you face difficulty, we're not saying, oh yeah, I wrecked my car and hallelujah. No, you say, there's a solidness, there's a contentment that I can walk with a joy that's not shaken, that I'm not rattled. And so when someone says rejoice in that, it's counterintuitive. At the very least, it's counterintuitive, and it can seem absurd. It's unnatural. So why? What's the rationale for saying rejoice when you face difficulties, when you face trials of many kinds, when you fall into unexpected trials of many kinds? Verse 3 gives the rationale, says knowing, but you know that, since you know that, the testing of your faith produces endurance. Says since you can rejoice because you know that there's something being produced here. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for you to get stronger. Rejoice. It's like if you're training physically. When it's hurting, not when it's pushing you, you can, even though it hurts, you can have a sense of accomplishment. You know that pain is producing something good. It's building something, right? And so he's saying you can rejoice to know that as you fall into various trials, that it's producing, it's accomplishing, it's bringing about the accomplishment, it says, of your faith, of the testing, the endurance. The testing of your faith produces endurance. And the word endurance is hupimonin, which is basically under the staying power or under remaining, being able to endure, being able to remain, hupomeno. And so that's the word now that carries over into verse 4, right? So he says, I bring you joyous greetings. Now rejoice. Rejoice. Total joy in every difficulty that you face when you fall into it, because you know that this testing of your faith produces hupomeno. And verse 4 says, and let hupomone, let endurance have its perfect teleon, its complete work, its work of maturity, a work that brings to completion, so that you may be perfect. And it's you may be is hete, which is you are becoming, so that you are existing as it says perfect here again, teleos, which has to do with complete. You're reaching the goal, and so there's a picture here of maturity. What's being the endurance when it's accomplishing its work, it's forming you, it's growing you, it's bringing you toward the goal, doing its work to bring you toward the goal of maturity, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So this word complete is holokleroi, which is kleroi has to do with your lot, your portions, your portion. So that's that's a word that's part of the word for inheritance, because it's that which is passed down, the lot, your portion that's passed down. So this is saying so that your portion will be whole. Holokleroi is that that you would be mature, and that your portion would be whole. That there would be a totality. And then it can feel like he's being redundant, but he's not being redundant. He's saying lacking in nothing. Lepomenoi. Lacking in nothing, that there's nothing left behind. You're not in need of anything. This is not at all, when he says lacking in nothing, this is not at all about materialism. This is not about lacking material goods. That's going to be pretty clear as you go through the book of James, as you go through the book of Jacob, that he's not pointing toward anything remotely close to the prosperity gospel. Not in the least. What he's talking about is that what is endurance going to produce in you? It's going to test your faith, and it's going to bring you, in doing its work, it's bringing you toward the goal, so that you are becoming whole, that you're becoming mature, and that you're mature and having a whole portion. You're mature and complete, that the wholeness of your character is being formed, not missing anything, not leaving behind anything. There's endurance is working to bring you to maturity. But here's the deal. So this is a character issue, but the issue is, so endurance has to do its work. But the fact is, because none of us have arrived there, we are all lacking, right? We're not yet complete, because the full and completing work of endurance has not yet fully accomplished its purpose, right? Just like Paul said, I have not yet attained this fullness of understanding, of knowing him, but I press on. So we know that the difficulties we face produce endurance. So we can rejoice because good things are happening here, because I'm being made more into his likeness. This is an opportunity. This is basically, one of my mentors would talk about, his name's Ken Nair, and he leads a ministry for men, and a marriage ministry. And one of the things he would talk about is when you face difficulties, he'd call them pop quizzes. When all of a sudden your flesh was tempted to fight for yourself. This was a pop quiz. This shows me I wasn't expecting this test. When I lost my cool, or I was selfish, and it was revealed as selfish. This was a pop quiz, and maybe I failed that test. But whenever I fall into pop quizzes of many kinds, that this was an opportunity for me to learn and recognize where I really am. Who am I really? Not just who do I think I am. Not just who do I say I am. Not what do I think I'm becoming, but what does the circumstance reveal about who I actually am becoming? Right? That's when the test actually shows what's happening. So that in the midst of difficulties, how I respond in that moment is an opportunity to reveal where I'm at, who I'm becoming. And I can rejoice in that because it's an opportunity to see, even in understanding where I'm failing, where I'm not yet complete. That it's an opportunity for me to see where I'm at, and then to ask the Lord to help me to grow in that area. And that's really a picture of what Jacob or James is painting here. It reveals what I'm lacking. Well, why should I rejoice when I'm lacking? When I realize that something that I'm lacking is revealed? Well, because the very thing I'm lacking, I'm not left alone with no hope or no recourse regarding what I'm lacking. If I'm lacking something, then I can take it to the Lord and ask him concerning what I lack. Again, this is not about what I lack in a material way. This is everything about what I'm lacking in my character, in a spiritual way. So he says in verse 5, building on that word lacking now. He says, but if any of you lepetai, if any of you lacks, and he brings up wisdom, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all without hesitation and without reproach, and it will be given to him. Now, this was one sentence, this verse, what I saw when I see, and I'm going to try to describe it to you in the literal way it's laid out in the Greek. It's really beautifully done in a way that I don't feel like the English, our English translations in terms of the way that we speak don't properly grasp it, and yet they're good translations, but they don't really paint the picture. But he says, if you're lacking, if your whole portion is not yet complete, and if wisdom is what you lack, just ask God. And so the flow of thought here, for some, when we will take this passage and set it apart as though it's not. Now he's talking about wisdom. Here he was talking about enduring suffering or enduring trials and difficulties and tests, and now he's talking about wisdom as though these are two separate thoughts, and they're not two separate thoughts. There's a flow of thought. Obviously, he's building. He's saying joy, endurance, and then so you're not left lacking. But if you are lacking, if what you lack is wisdom, then ask God. What we understand is that the wisdom is often precisely what enables us to stand or endure in times of trials, and that's what leads to wholeness. What we need, wisdom is required. What we need to ask is wisdom, is God's perspective, because the faithful don't always know how to persevere. I don't always know how to see this with your perspective, Lord, or how to respond. And again, wisdom, biblical wisdom, is always tied to, it's not simply an understanding, but it's tied to how I then live out my life in response to what I understand. So when I don't know how to persevere, right, then I need God's understanding. I need God's wisdom. I need divine wisdom. So if any of you are lacking wisdom to be able to see this, then he needs to ask God. But here's what I loved. It says here, literally it says, but if any of you is lacking or leaving behind wisdom, let him request, and then it puts in a phrase here, and it says, let him request from the giver, God of all things, or giver of all, and then he uses a word, I'm going to clear this up in a second, with simplicity. So what you have here, I feel like I'm not explaining it well, but it basically puts the very identity of God as the giver. It says, the giver, God. Normally you would say, tu theou, God, who gives to all. But it sticks the who gives right between the article and the title God. So it's ask the one who gives, God, to all with simplicity, or with singleness is the idea. And so you could actually take that clause, if you removed that clause, right, then he would be saying, ask of God, and it will be given to him, right? When you read this verse, it says, if any of you are lacking wisdom, let him ask from the God who gives everything with straightforwardness and without insult, or without reproach, without disgrace, and it will be given to him. So the other thing it tells us about the Lord here is it says, like in some versions, like in our version, and I like the way that the TLV puts it here. It says, "Who gives to all without hesitation." I think that's a nice way of translating it. Some will say, "Who gives to all generously," but it's actually a word, aplos, which is aplos means it stands in contrast to duplos. So right, diplos is twofold or double. Aplos means consisting of one, single. It's simple and unmixed, sincerely, straightforward. So a lot of times, think about how people have to deal when you know the games you have to play when you ask, the manipulative games that people play to get what they want, that when someone would come in to talk to a king or someone in authority, they'd have to couch the language in such a way so as to, kind of hint around and see if they can finagle things to get it their way. That's not how you have to deal with God, who by his very nature, it says, who the God, the one who gives to all, and he does it just straight in a straightforward way. He does it with simplicity, with sincerity, in a straightforward way. Again, this stands in contrast to the split-minded, the double-mindedness that he'll address in a minute. That God is you can ask him. So I can rejoice because if I'm lacking anything, when the trials show, when the trials are producing endurance, the endurance that has to do its work in me, so that when it's done doing its work, that I won't be lacking in anything, right? But the fact is, I am lacking. Sometimes I'm lacking in the wisdom to be able to handle these circumstances with joy. So I ask for wisdom, and I can ask for wisdom because I'm asking, and I can ask for that, for God to do that in my character, to bring that about in my character. And he'll answer because I'm asking a God who is a giving God, who gives just in a straightforward way. He's not playing games. You're not having to do a manipulative dance with God with your words. A lot of the things I've often struggled with, the way certain aspects of prayer are sometimes approached, like where people will be like, well, you have to say it like this to God. If you use, when people give you the formulas, when people tell you oh no, you can't say that because then God will, then God will hold you to that. And if you say it in those words, when God sees past that and sees right to our heart, when we're like a toddler that we don't put our words in the right order, he can see what we're asking for. We don't have to worry about getting it just right. The example I've often given is when Antonio was little and he would hold up his arms and he would say, hold you, right? He wasn't saying it correctly, but I knew what he was saying. And as a loving father, I delighted in what he was saying, though it was grammatically incorrect, right? I was like, that's beautiful. And I knew he wanted me to hold him. And so I would reach down and pick him up. And when we go to the Lord and he sees our hearts and we say, hold you, I need wisdom, Lord. That we don't have to play games, that he gives us, he's a God who answers, and with a straightforward way. He is straightforward. He is single-minded. So when you come to him asking, verse 6 says, but let him ask. Now asking is the word that's repeated here. So ask him. But when you ask with confidence. Ask in faith without any doubting. Now the word for doubting here is diakrino, which is used in different ways throughout the New Covenant Scriptures. So diakrino means krino is to judge, through judgment. So in 1 Corinthians 4 and 1 Corinthians 11, it's used to describe judging between persons. Distinguishing in Romans 14, when you're distinguishing between various foods, that's the word diakrino is here. And it speaks of an internal debate, so that hence the word doubt. So when you come to the Lord, don't have a divided, you have to come with confidence in him, in his character. Why? Because he is the God who gives everything with simplicity and single-mindedness. He's not, you don't have to play these games. So don't come doubting and debating internally whether you should walk in his ways, or whether you should obey him, or whether you should ask for wisdom. Ask him to do this, but ask with wholeheartedness, not in a divided way. So let him ask in confidence, in faith, without any doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. So you have that very apt picture there. that describes something that's unstable, that's undependable, that you never know which way it's going to go. And so he says, come to the Lord who answers with singleness. Don't be divided. Verse 7 says, for that person, for that person must not suppose he will receive anything from the Lord. Or it says, for do not suppose that man will be receiving anything from the Lord. Verse 8, since he is a man divided in soul. The word is dipsukos, a split soul. His suke, his soul, his psyche is divided, is split. And since he is a man divided in soul, unstable in all his ways, or unable to stand, it's unstable is a word that has to do with not able to stand in everything, in all of his ways. And speaking of in ways, it uses the word for path. Like in Hebrew, we would say derech, in all of his derech, in all of his paths, in all of his ways. This is a guy who, because he's not going to be single-minded in his focus on the Lord, and when he asks the Lord, but he's always having this internal debate. How am I going to rejoice? How am I going to consider it? How am I going to let joy lead the way? See, this is the thing. This is where there has to be a single-mindedness. Dear Lord, I am determined to be faithful to you, so that when I fall into trials, into difficulties that I wasn't expecting, that in advance, Lord, I've asked you for the wisdom. I'm asking you for the wisdom to be able to see this through your eyes, to see this from your perspective, not to decide in the moment. You know, when I was several years ago, now 3 years ago, I lost about 50 pounds, which I need to lose some of them back. I gained a few of them back, but I lost 50 pounds. One of the things that when people would say, what was the key, and there were a lot of different things that I could point to, but to me the biggest thing was I had made up my mind in advance that I was going to, my goal was not about losing weight, it was just about living healthy and eating healthy. And I'd made a decision, and this is how I was going to operate. So when I would be going to a birthday party, I already made a decision in advance about how I was going to approach it. I wasn't waiting until I got there and someone put the cake in front of me, or puts the big cake and ice cream, to determine how I'm going to approach it. I had made up my mind in advance. If I wait and go, well, I'll figure it out when I see it, I can guarantee you put the cheesecake in front of me, or you put a bowl of ice cream in front of me, that in that moment I'm going to go, yeah, okay, I'll go ahead and have it. But you make up your mind in advance. And so it's that single-mindedness so when I'm facing difficulties, I need to count it all joy, because I know that these difficulties are producing something in me. But in the moment of the difficulties, I can't always see that. So I need the wisdom of God. God, give me the wisdom to see this through your perspective. And knowing that if I will see it from your perspective, if I genuinely want to see from your perspective, and I want to have your wisdom, that if I'm not kind of like going back and forth, then I will be solid and straight in all my ways. I need the wisdom of the Lord, but I need to be determined in advance that I'm going to walk in faithfulness to him, that I'm going to see through his perspective. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and stop there for today at the end of verse 8, and then we'll continue tomorrow. Again, sorry that we're having these internet issues and that we weren't able to greet everyone. I do know my mom is here, so I'll say hello, Mama. I love you. And I could probably list off a bunch of your names that we're all together every day, but I'm just going to say I'll see you tomorrow. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.
We're rising from the ashes to the stars. You're the joy, 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 light in my soul. The joy, 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 make the joy, 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 making me whole though I'm broken. I am running into your arms of love, into your arms.